Reserve University School of Medicine in Cleveland, Ohio. This is the All Access Med School Admissions Podcast. Hello again, everybody. I'm your host, Christian Essman, and I'm the Senior Director of Admissions and Financial Aid at the Med School at Case. Hi! It's been a little while since you've heard from me, hasn't it? Well, with this episode, I hope it's been worth the wait. I think this is an episode that's hopefully going to satisfy a lot of listeners because I've received a lot, and I mean a lot, of emails asking if I can get Northwestern on my podcast. So here we go. While you haven't heard me on my show recently, I've actually been invited to be on a couple other podcast shows that I invite you to check out. I was a guest on the Clinical Excellence podcast that's out of University of Chicago. You might remember that I interviewed Dr. Adam Sifu in episode 61, and he asked me to come on to his show to talk about med school admissions. And I was also a guest on another show called Science Behind Science that is run by a second-year medical student at Ohio State, along with a researcher from the Cleveland Clinic. And we had a very long conversation all about admissions. So you'll find links to both those shows in the show description of this episode. Speaking of appearances, at the time I'm publishing this episode, I want to encourage you to check out the AAMC's free medical school virtual fair coming up on Tuesday, October 17th and Wednesday, the 18th. Now, on Tuesday, it's a full day of information sessions led by admissions experts and medical students from all around the country. And so some of the sessions are like how to gauge when you're ready to apply and demystifying combined degree programs like BSMD, MD, MPH, MD, PhD. There's one on money management, budgeting, and scholarships. There's one on strategies for high-stakes tests like the MCAT. And the one that I'm going to be on is called Watch What Happens Live. Live mock interviews with real admissions officers. I'll be doing that panel with an admissions dean from UC Davis's med school and a fourth-year medical student from the University of Kentucky, where we'll be talking about tips for interviewing. I'm really looking forward to it, and we're leaving a lot of time for questions from attendees. The AAMC folks tell me that they'll be recording all these sessions and they'll be making them available on YouTube as well. So if you have a conflict that day, you can check it out later. So that's Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, the 18th, is a full day of virtual fair stuff where you can drop into different med school booths and text chat with officials and students from that school. I tell you, we've been doing these virtual fairs with the AAMC for a few years now. And they've really gotten a nice system down that makes it really easy for both the visitors and the admissions people to connect with one another. And so, again, this is a free event, and I've put a registration link in the show description, so hope to see you there. Okay, there are some updates and things I think you should check out. Now, let's get into all things Northwestern and some background information about this medical school. Established in 1859, Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine is a renowned institution committed to advancing medical education, research, and healthcare in the region and beyond. So while the main campus of Northwestern University is located in Evanston, just north of the city of Chicago, Illinois, the School of Medicine is actually located in downtown Chicago and has become a leading hub for medical training, research, and patient care. The Feinberg School of Medicine educates their students in a prominent network of teaching hospitals, including Northwestern Memorial, Lurie Children's, Prentice Women's, Shirley Ryan Ability Lab, Stroger Cook County, and the Jesse Brown VA Medical Center. Their location gives students access to top-rated clinical affiliates as well as to the city of Chicago's vibrant cultural landscape. With a mission to impact the practice of medicine through discovery and education to improve human health and a vision to achieve this mission through continuous quality improvement, their ultimate goal is educating future leaders in medicine. To accomplish this, they value excellence in all arenas, from clinical care to research. Their medical students not only receive hands-on clinical experience from day one, they also use state-of-the-art facilities like their simulation center, volunteer in community clinics, pursue global health opportunities, and have basic science, translational, and clinical research options, as well as the opportunity to engage the cultural life of Chicago and work with its diverse population. At Feinberg, medical education is built upon 4 innovative curricular elements: science in medicine, clinical medicine, health and society, and professional development. And the 6 threads that run through the curriculum: healthcare quality and patient safety, medical decision-making and diagnostic testing, teamwork and leadership, lifestyle medicine, health equity and advocacy, and digital health and data science. We kind of dive into these different topics with Dr. Kundu, so stay tuned for that. Feinberg is a private institution and accepts Canadian and international applicants. Applications from those with the DACA status are handled on a case-by-case basis. Last year, they received 8,072 applications and interviewed 806 for a class size of 150. I've also included some links in the episode description of some topics that we didn't necessarily dive into in great detail, but we felt we should pass these along to you for additional information. So you'll find some extra links on other aspects of the school. So I had this wonderful conversation with Dr. Roopal Kundu, who is an absolute star, and the Jacob R. Suker, MD, professor of medical education and a professor of dermatology and medical education at Feinberg. Dr. Kundu serves as the founding director of the Northwestern Center for Ethnic Skin and Hair, which provides dermatology care along with educational programs, community outreach, and clinical trials research. Her research focuses on the understanding of skin disorders that occur more frequently or adversely impact individuals with skin of color. Dr. Kundu joined the medical education team first as a program director for both the dermatology and combined medicine dermatology residency programs for nearly 8 years before moving on to become the associate dean for admissions in 2016. Side note, a program director is analogous to like the dean of admissions, but it's for residency programs. So she's basically been in admissions for a long time. Dr. Kundu loves the opportunity to see patients, teach at Northwestern Medicine and the Jesse Brown Veterans Administration Medical Center, conduct research in her research areas of interest, and be a part of the recruitment and journey of the next generation of physicians. Dr. Kundu has held leadership roles with the American Academy of Dermatology, Skin of Color Society, and the Association of American Medical Colleges. She's fabulous. So let's get right into it. Dr. Kundu, so glad to have you here. So nice to see you. Thank you so much for joining me.
It's such a pleasure to be here, Christian. Thanks for having me, and please call me Roopal.
Okay, thank you, Roopal. Thank you so much. Well, I just read your bio to people that are listening, but I'd love to kind of hear a little bit how you found yourself in this role in admissions. You've been in it since 2016. Was this an aspiration of yours that you've always had, or was it just something, an opportunity that came along that you found yourself, getting involved?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it wasn't exactly an aspiration. I do recall from my residency interviews writing down that I wanted to be a program director. And indeed, that was my initial role. I was the program director for dermatology and also a combined medicine dermatology program for 8 years. And during that time, I also oversaw the selection committee, obviously had an opportunity to kind of be part of selection, but then also nurturing the residents through the program and guiding them into their next steps. And through that, I was offered an opportunity to join the general MD admissions committee. So I did that for a few years. And then after a time, our previous associate dean of admissions decided to step down, and I was able to transition into that role.
And you've loved it ever since.
I have loved it ever since. It is such a humbling experience. It's such an honor to really be part of the navigation of identifying those individuals who will be future Feinberg ambassadors, but really the next generation of physicians, and thinking about who we are in medicine at Feinberg and the type of individuals we want to come to join our community.
Yeah, we really are shaping the face of medicine when we're in these roles. It's a very much a privilege, like you said. So you live in Chicago. It's a great city. What do you like to do there?
Oh, what do I not
Where
like
do
to
you
do? There's
start?
so much to do. I mean, I think when we think of Chicago, obviously we have our incredible lakefront.
Hmm.
And I always say we love to be in our lake, on our lake, next to our lake, but we have 18 miles of lakefront and beaches. And being next to a body of water just allows for a whole host of different, very kind of active
Hmm.
activities to be part of, from biking to swimming to running. I am more on the biking side. I used to be
Hmm.
a runner, but I really enjoy biking, and we do bikes with my family, which is really fun. Of course, we have an incredible food scene. I think we're
Hmm.
major foodies here. I get to go and explore because we have so many different communities. So the diversity of kind of cuisine is incredible. We have a event that's called Taste of
Oh
Chicago.
yeah.
But it really is kind of exemplifying the tastes of Chicago that are here because of the different communities that are here. So it is really fun to be in that space as well. And I just think the culture, I mean, from the museums to the theater district, I guess I should say the sports scene.
Hmm.
Sometimes we hang our head a little low, but it's fun. It's really fun to be part
Yeah.
of our collegiate sports and the professional sports as well. I don't know. I think there's just a little bit of everything, and I have been able to enjoy all those. I was at the Lincoln Park Zoo recently. Went to see a show in the theater with my family. Planning to check out some restaurants with some girlfriends coming up, and it's really fun. And our students are always engaged in all those
I
spaces
bet.
as well.
Yeah, I bet. So much to do. Lastly, before we kind of flip over to the curricular related things, what's that? What's something that people are surprised to learn about you?
Hmm. Um, I think probably I do share a bit about myself as time goes on, but I I don't know. I'll tell you something fun we did this summer,
Yeah, yeah.
which is related to food. We had a task to go to a new ice cream shop within the city every week. So that
Nice.
was a really fun thing. And we kind of augment that with cooking. So I really do enjoy quick cooking, all different types of cuisines. We did Thai last
Mhm.
night, so trying new recipes and seeing if I get the approval from my kids. My dog will eat everything, so
Yeah.
we always got that.
That's wonderful. All right. Well, let's switch over to curricular related highlights. And so when we're out and about and you're meeting with prospective applicants on webinars or in person, let's talk about some of those aspects of Feinberg that you like to get across to people that you find to be unique or it's important for them to know about. Where do you like to start when you're having those kinds of conversations with prospective students?
Well, I like to start kind of with the end,
Mm.
in this idea that we really are trying to train exceptional clinicians, who will then go on to be leaders in medicine. And it's this concept of, medical school right?
Mm.
And so
Hmm.
I am going to provide exceptional patient care. I am going to be very thoughtful, engaged, empathetic, have cultural humility within the room, taking care
Hmm.
of the patient. And I am going to contribute to medicine, to science, to the community, to education, right, in a whole host of different ways. And that we're not very prescriptive in what that is. It
Hmm.
could be that you become a scientist, or you become a medical educator, or you go into international health. You're involved in your local community organizations. The sky is the limit. I think with having the privilege of being a physician and the really incredible, unique skill set that you hold after attending medical school and beyond, there is so much opportunity for us to be kind of physician citizens. And so, with that in mind, if we go backwards, we want to give you the toolbox, the foundation to be able to achieve those future goals. And so, of course, the integrated clinical training with our education centered medical home, which I would say is a pillar of the Feinberg experience, our area of scholarly concentration, kind of the research exposure that you have, learning how to critically look at the literature, just thinking about how discovery impacts human health and how they'll be integrated in taking care of patients in the future. And then I think mentorship. And I feel very proud of our institution of how many distinctive mentors are sometimes assigned. And we have really 3 mentors that are with you for all 4 years of your time with us, which is extraordinarily special. And those mentors, we say they're mentors, but I think they're sponsors and coaches and champions and cheerleaders and all these other roles that they hold as well.
Oh, that's wonderful. I like how you started at the end and worked your way backward. And then I also wrote down physician citizen. That really nails what your description. In the pre-clerkship curriculum, I noticed there's a couple phases. Mm-hmm. What are some of those highlights about those first 2 years that you like to express to people?
Absolutely. So we do call our curriculum phases. So phase 1 is what maybe someone would think of as a traditional preclinical, but we don't call it that, because I think what I would want to really relay is that we have these 4 core curricular elements that are part of the Feinberg experience: science and medicine, clinical medicine, health and society, and professional development. And those 4 components are with you for all 4 years. They're at a variety of preferences and priorities and time commitment. So in the beginning, you're very heavy in science and medicine. As you end, you're going to be very heavy in your own personal professional development. But because of that, I think that you're, again, going back to that toolbox, really gaining the skills to allow you to be successful in the future as you navigate all those juggling roles and responsibilities in the future. And we're not really going kind of programmatically from, this 6 weeks to the next 4 weeks to the next 8 weeks. We're integrating all of that. So the integration of phase 1, and then the community that we're really trying to create: collaboration, collegiality. And we do that through having kind of a pass curriculum during that phase 1 time. We really want to build a Feinberg community. It's very, very important to us. Medical school is hard, for sure. Moving your way to the path of medicine is hard. And beyond that, it's very challenging to have the privilege to take care of anybody else, let alone hundreds or thousands of individuals, and have an impact on communities, is a really, really rich responsibility. And so we want to make sure that then is a time to lean in and kind of have this village of support around our students.
I have to say, you have a wonderful website. And I just wrote down some notes to include a link to the page. It's about the curricular elements. And there's a diagram that kind of shows how they change over the course of 4 years, that some increase as you progress through years of 3 and 4, where others decrease. And so it really nicely lays out what this can look like. So when you're listening to this, when you're done, go and look at the website, because it's really well done. And I have some other compliments about your website when we get to the admissions piece, but it really helps display what she's explaining here. Roopal, what about what's the curricular structure or the way students learn in the first 2 years? I read there's some inquiry-based small group learning, PBL kind of stuff. Is there a lecture? What's the mix look like?
Absolutely. I think that we've really tried to take a student-centric approach of looking at our learners and their preferences. We've done it in a very academic fashion. And we realize there's a lot of different preferences. And there's some content that sits well being lecture-based, faculty-led lectures, but in different formats. So we'll have live synchronous, asynchronous, we'll have flipped classroom content. And that is kind of the structure of the core science and medicine. So there'll be potentially, a handful of hours that there's faculty-led content in these different formats on an organ system. So we are organ systems based. What's really important for us is that in parallel, we're really trying to help the student translate and transfer that knowledge into clinical medicine, clinical decision-making, clinical skills. So as you're learning an organ system, You'll in parallel be in clinical medicine. You'll have now a faculty come in and show you, how do you take a history of present illness for a chief complaint that's relevant to that organ system? How do you do the physical exam of that organ system, the lungs, the heart, et cetera?
Yeah.
And then that's where we also, in terms of thinking about how all the different students are learning, is pivot into our clinical education center, where we have these hands-on experiences with standardized patients, again, which allows us to kind of access the diversity of our city of Chicago. We have a few hundred different SPs that represent that diversity. And so the student now is practicing those same skills, getting constructive feedback, because we must sit in a growth mindset and know that I feel strongly that we're kind of better and better versions of ourselves each day. We're always learning and growing in medicine. And so then we take that, and I think what's special, and I referenced before, education-centered medical home. This is that kind of group or cohort of individuals who's together. We have 4 M1s, 2s, 3, 4s, so 16 students with a faculty mentor. So first of many mentors who's with you for all 4 years, and mid-level providers learning how to work on a team and a panel of patients. So the Education-Centered Medical Home, what we call ECMH, is now the space for at least one of its multi-pronged benefits, is to learn those skills again. So we're on the pulmonary system, and we'll ask our students to practice a lung exam while they're at their physical ECMH site. We have 40 different sites that are sprinkled across the city of Chicago. Part of Feinberg being attached to Northwestern medicine and these incredible hospital systems is that we also have this really wide catchment area. We have 60 different clinical sites, and a key principle of Northwestern medicine is that we, of course, take care of patients in the acute setting, but we're also in the physical spaces where our patients live. And so our sites are sprinkled across the city of Chicago, also within downtown, of course. But we have 40 sites. About half of them are FQHCs, or federally qualified health centers. And so this is now a place that, we'll start with those clinical skills. And as the student moves up through, they'll also work on quality improvement projects. And something that I'm really excited about, and we can talk about now or later, is CHI, which is called our Community Health Advocacy Initiative. And this is now a place where we go back to anchor into that idea of being a physician citizen and a physician advocate. And how does a physician, a healthcare provider, identify gaps, inequities, disparities within a panel of patients, but then work with community health organizations within that community to really partner and have sustainable impact. Our students do a project every year. It's from the phase 1 curriculum, and it's incredible. Gun violence, childhood obesity, mental health, a lot during the pandemic, and kind of understanding vaccines, thinking about smoking cessation in a different language, right? A lot of our patients are not speaking English as their primary language. So I get off tangent, but I get really excited about how integrated your experiences in phase 1 are. And then we top it off with having team-based and problem-based learning, where we again kind of model this idea of taking care of a patient from start to finish. So we teach in organ systems, but our body is not in a singular organ system. And so when we think about team-based learning and problem-based learning, it's more about taking a patient and a chief complaint from start to finish and thinking, okay, well, this patient has shortness of breath. Well, I guess that could be from the lungs, but could it be from the heart, or could it be from the brain, or what else do I need to think about? And really doing that integration. So what I love about Feinberg is we kind of meet students where they are in different places. We're able to kind of align to all the different preferences of the learner. Some like faculty-led lectures, some want to be in a problem-based group, some are in that team-based group, and then of course the hands-on learning, because that's in the end how we deliver care.
That sounds fantastic. Yeah, there's so many great aspects there. When you were talking about the education-centered medical home, and there's first years to fourth years in groups of about, I think you said 16. Are the students, are the first years working with fourth years and third years? So they're all,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
Yes. And that's the other, I mean, there's so many aspects to
Yeah, there's
how
like
ECMH is so
vertical
special.
mentoring can be taking place there.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
you will team up, an M1 is teamed up with an M3 or 4. So at first you're learning, but while that M3, M4 is teaching, as a senior student, you can be the chief of the ECMH. So now you're thinking about how to organize the team. Who should see this patient versus that patient? How should we integrate discussing, with managing with the staff and thinking about that and recognizing that we work on healthcare teams. Every single member of the team is equally important. And what is our role that's unique as a physician, as a student, that we're really going to elevate the team, right? We're going to all raise ourselves up together. So there's so much to gain. And we've been doing this for a long time. And you do start from your first weeks of medical school and go throughout. So the richness of the experience and layering on quality improvement and now CHI with community health is, to me, is just extraordinary of how you can really think about how to provide care and how you can be engaged in a panel of patients, like within your own space. And not everyone's going to do everything in the future, but having some of those initial skills and recognizing the importance and value and being part of the solution, I think is really wonderful.
Yeah, I was thinking too, as you're talking about that with the first years to the fourth years and the fourth years or third years or fourth years, it can be like the quote unquote chiefs. And this is probably also helping them get ready to go to residency where they'll be teaching medical students and they'll have eventually maybe some chief responsibilities as chief resident. And so this is really kind of prepping them for what is to come after they leave.
Absolutely.
Med school.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's fantastic. How about so you mentioned a little bit of how students get involved in the community medically? That's embedded in the curriculum. It's baked in. Talk a little bit about what else are they doing in the Chicago area that you find most students get involved in, or is there something that students tend to go into, or is it just kind of based on personal preferences?
So we have nearly 90 different student organizations, and they fall into, of course, kind of affinity identity groups, some of those clinical care, community outreach groups, advocacy groups. I would say all of our students are involved in some way. Everyone has, what they have identified as their passion, their interests that they want to spend more time in. And so there is a kind of great diversity in those types of organizations. Our most robust in terms of the clinical experience in the community are what's called CHC or community health clinics. And there's a group of them. And those clinics, along with Chicago Youth Program or CYP, which I should say, I was a Feinberg student and I was in that clinic way back when, a long time ago. So there's a lot of sustainability of these programs. Those are something that our students are really active in and engaged in, kind of giving back. And these are, again, kind of outside the immediate landscape of our downtown campus in Streeterville, but more in some of the cities, and are, again, partnered at, some of them are at like almost ECMH sites, right? So our faculty are at these sites providing care. And then some of them are private kind of community health partnerships that we have.
You mentioned affinity groups. Can you describe how students from these groups are supported through the curriculum or through the school? Absolutely.
I think it is through a multitude of ways. Physically, we have what I call the hallway of support. We have in our medical school, we have admissions, we have MSDP, we have the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, we have what we call AWOME, our Augusta Webster Office of Medical Education, so our Med Ed office, the library, the Starbucks, all the things. So in this space, we are able to, I think, like, as I said, physically kind of support, but we really think about all of our competencies very holistically. And in this space, I would lean towards our kind of commitment to wellness and student balance. And so we think of that as a multi-pronged competency where we have emotional, spiritual, financial, community. I mean, there's so many ways to think about wellness. And so all of our students with their different identities are supported through a whole host of things. So there's some that are very forward facing for every single student. If an individual identifies in a certain faith, a certain underrepresented in medicine group, our LGBTQ plus alliance, we have a lot of other different kind of racial, ethnic identity groups as well. And then some of ours, like DocMed, which is our Disability Advocacy Coalition in Medicine, really an extraordinary group that is a newer group to campus. And we have our kind of first generation group, our Wandering Paths group, individuals who came to medicine later.
Oh, nice.
So just a lot of different ways that, all these groups are open to everybody, because I think for us, it's really developing that community of inclusivity and trying to strive to always kind of learn and grow from each other and recognize different lived experiences and narratives, also kind of start to understand each other as well. So we want to, our class composition, our Feinberg community, we want to kind of be similar, representing kind of the diversity of our Chicago community that we have as well. So it's a roundabout way of answering your question, but I think
that's
it's
exactly
so
what I was
many
looking
different
for.
things that we do.
It sounds like you are creating spaces for students to feel like they belong. And I think
that is the goal.
Because when everybody comes to med school, this is for the most part, most people don't know anybody. This is a whole new class, cohort, group of friends they have to network and build, and trying to find ways for students to feel like they belong.
Yeah. And I love that you said that, Christian, because that's on our first day when everyone comes, I'm able to kind of hand off our matriculants to AWOMI, our med ed team. And that's my message, is mostly, I kind of say it multiple times. It's like, you belong here. You belong here. There are going to be moments where you question that. This is going to be a challenge. There's going to be ups and downs, but you belong here, and we'll make sure that you have that feeling. We will provide that together, right? I mean, there's of course the contribution of the student too, which is the fun of it all.
Yeah.
It's amazing to be interacting with all of them.
Nobody accidentally gets into med school.
Right.
It just doesn't happen that way.
Yes.
There's a lot of vetting that goes on to get to one of those seats. And so it's good to emphasize that to our students, because if you're there, you belong there. You've made it that far, and a lot of people have put a lot of work into making those decisions to get you there. So, what about you talked about the hallway of support, which includes a Starbucks.
Yes.
What about?
Well, I would say admissions has really good coffee. I always tell everyone, please come by to admissions, where there might be Starbucks coffee and coffee machine.
Come on down to our coffee.
Yes, please.
What about how are students supported? I think a popular question we've been getting, I think the last few years, has been about health and wellness and support. What have you found is something that students at Feinberg are getting that wellness piece filled in, or that health piece?
Yes, absolutely. So one, it's incorporated in our competencies, which I think is so special and unique. So we think about, what we've done is we've thought about, actually from the start, what are the characteristics of the successful candidate? Are, from exploring medicine to be academically prepared, to working on teams, to thinking about altruism. We've mapped those on to our Feinberg competencies that we want our graduates to attain. And one of that is this idea of what we call self-care, personal wellness and self-care. And it is as important as your patient-centered medical knowledge, right, as scholarship. And it includes this idea that we must take care of ourselves as individuals in order to be able to provide exceptional care to others. And so we must acknowledge those other, those platforms of wellness we were talking about: physical wellness, emotional wellness, spiritual wellness, community wellness, financial wellness. All these components are affecting us at all times. And so during, we have a time where you go over your core competencies. We call it our portfolio. So we think a lot about there's a lot discussed on what we must learn in medicine. What are the components a medical school should be educating their students on? Well, we have to kind of reflect, well, did we learn those, right? This is through assessments. It's really important for us to acknowledge that. But one of those is that self-care. And so to me, it's so integrated into kind of the curriculum. And then that allows us to have programming, right? That's aligned with that. So of course we have opportunities to have mindfulness, meditation. We have fun things like our interest groups will do, like the dance interest group will have a little session, that people can do and unwind. We have CAPS, our counseling and psychological services. We have our own team that's on site in our downtown campus. And that was a lot of effort from our med ed team putting that together to really understand and prioritize that in terms of that kind of emotional and psychological wellness. And then a lot of community building, right? Kind of creating those safe spaces for our individuals to connect and be able to, I guess, share kind of all the ups and downs of going through medical school, but life. I always say life happens while you're in medical school.
It doesn't stop when med school begins.
It does not stop. And so sometimes we need to stop or pause or just, take a breath. And so I think that it's really multifold within the curriculum, within the student organizations, and then kind of the surrounding understanding that this is a time for you to develop this really important skill of being able to have self-care and personal wellness. Again, as importantly as staying current with the literature and communicating and being inquiry driven. So I love that has been one of the, kind of core components that we're hoping to give to our students as they graduate.
I've been thinking about this since these topics have become more at the forefront talked about in the last, say, 3 years. And it'll be interesting to see if it's able to be measurable over the coming 10 years. If there's a burnout survey that they find that students who have been practicing or it's been kind of built into their curricular or training, that is there less burnout 10 years from now than what we're seeing in physician populations today?
It's really interesting. Sometimes we're kind of, again, as we said, shaping. We're also shaping then what happens with residency and then shaping what happens with junior faculty. And we're seeing a lot of commitment within GME and then within faculty development as well to this. So I hope that, again, we're kind of shaping medicine, right? I mean, all of this is adjusting because we want to make sure that these very highly trained and skilled individuals are able to kind of perform at their best, but really holistically thinking about them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of recalibrating what expectations are a little bit. We'll see. A couple more questions for you. Then I want to talk about the admissions piece. And the second to last thing I want to ask you is, you mentioned assessment, and I heard you a little bit ago say pass. Can you talk a little bit about what do you mean by pass curriculum, and what do assessments look like, particularly in the first 2 years?
Yeah, absolutely. So pass to me means that we say the number one predictor of graduating and successfully promoting through medical school is starting, right? I mean, really, the attrition is very low and life will happen, and you'll need at times academic support, non-academic support, and we'll have that available to you. We actually have a whole kind of learning team. We have a learning specialist who meets with every student to help guide their learning strategies. Learning in medicine is very different than probably anything anyone's done yet. And so we want our students to have mastery and competency. And so we have to kind of, again, understand the needs of the student. So in terms of that then is that there's no grades, right? There's no Z-score, there's no ranking. None of those things exist in that phase one experience.
Okay.
And so that's what it is. It's really about mastery, working with your community, your teams, your PBL group, your TBL group. And we hope, just thriving and wanting to learn as much as you can so you can be that great, exceptional clinician in the future, right? There's so much to take in, but it's also learning how to learn because there's a deep recognition that no one knows everything when it comes to medicine. But there is foundational knowledge to allow you to know how to learn, how to access peer-reviewed literature, how to communicate, how to prioritize. I mean, there's just so many different concepts that are there.
Yeah. Then the last thing I want to ask you is, what's something when you're meeting prospective students that you wish they knew more about Feinberg, or maybe it's hidden someplace that they haven't discovered yet?
Well, I think that Feinberg is really special because of that community that's there. And we really pride ourselves of being nice and team players and very curious and inquiry driven. And so that community and the sponsorship, this idea that there's going to be just so many champions for you. And I have the privilege of being in a lot of spaces. I see patients at Northwestern, at one of our clinical affiliates, the VA hospital, do research. I work in admissions and with the med team. And in all these spaces, there is such a passion and really thought that we were going to work collaboratively to do wonderful things and propel whatever that area forward. And so those are kind of the intangible tangibles. Like you'll feel it when you're there, but it's just a very special place. And I would be remiss not to talk a little bit about the opportunities for research and scholarship at Feinberg. We are known to be a research institution. Many of us who identify as clinician educators also contribute to science and research. And I think that it's really this principle that we want our students to be curious, ask questions in a whole different slew of ways. And as you know, science can be done so many different ways. But really have this curiosity and then give the foundational skills. Again, it's all about building a strong foundation to understand and interpret basic stats, research methods, research techniques, how to critically look at the literature, how to do a literature search, for example, because we are inundated with billions of data points every day. And it is becoming, to me, an ever important task of the physician to be able to consolidate that information and to individualize it for the patient in front of you. And so I feel strongly that we need to really have this skill set. So we have every single student that's part of Feinberg participate in some type of scholarship. What exactly that looks like is individualized for sure, but it adds on to that mentorship because that mentor is with you for 4 years of time as well. Cool. So we have something that's specifically called AOSC, or Area of Scholarly Concentration. And that is a kind of mentor supported project that you do and take a really deep dive, but all the while having these really kind of core seminars to build your scientific knowledge as well.
That's great. I love the tie-ins with the kind of the in-class work to help teach, because I have to think that not everybody who comes to Feinberg has had to have a robust research experience to get into Feinberg. Is that safe to say?
Yeah. I would say that everyone's probably participated in some form, but it could range from a capstone to a senior thesis to someone who's been a clinical research coordinator to someone who's been at the NIH. There's a lot of variety, but some display of the curiosity, of course, because that's kind of a core characteristic. And so then you find and match up to the type of project you might want to do, right? It's really quite varied. We have hundreds of students with hundreds of projects that they have the opportunity to do with any Northwestern faculty. So
sounds like
it's quite robust.
It's pretty broadly defined.
It is broadly
defined. What that research could look like, or that scholarly project could look like.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, I think the appetite is whet. Now we have to talk about, all right, so what are we looking for in the applicants at Feinberg, and what that screening process looks like? So you mentioned the characteristics of successful applicants and how it ties into aspects of the curriculum. I'm going to link to this site because it is really well done. And I think it's it's insightful to kind of just, you put it out. This is what we're looking for in our successful characteristics of applicants. Can you talk a little bit more about what that looks like in the screening process?
Absolutely. So we want those students, again, who are inquiry driven, who are academically ready for the rigors of medical school, that have had meaningful explorations of medicine, clearly identified that this is the next step for them, have an altruistic spirit,
Mm-hmm.
our professional and commitment and maturity. And so there is a holistic review, because there's so many components of the application that come in, right? A very robust primary application. We've thought about our secondary application of the supplemental questions to be asked, along with those letters of recommendation and the kind of academic record. And so all of that is incorporated, and every application is reviewed in order to really understand, is this student aligned to those kind of successful characteristics? And Christian, there's so many wonderful students. I wish we could meet every single one of them. I think I really feel I have a lot of empathy for students and their experience. There truly are, and I always say I'm incredibly grateful for that, because this generation will be taking care of us in the future. And so we do have a map of those things that allow our admissions committee to think about those. Those are the characteristics they're looking for through the experiences you share, the narratives you share, the other impactful experiences that are there, the letter writers and their contribution as well. So all of it comes together from all the kind of pieces of the puzzle to shape the entire applicant.
Yeah, it's not easy.
No,
it's not easy. And I will mention to our applicants that it's impossible to interview everybody. And there's not a school out there that could do it. And so it's hard to get those interview invites. And when you do, that's an achievement. I mean, that is an achievement in and of itself. So, but it's very clear that your school lays out to the students what you're looking for and how, but it's, tying those together. I don't think the applicant has to feel that you do the tying together, right?
Correct.
Yeah. They don't have to kind of make it look like they're hitting every checkbox. It comes from a variety of different sources.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And a variety of different experiences.
Right.
So that's what's so beautiful. And again, goes to that idea of kind of the total class composition really representing diversity of thought, experiences, geography, identities. I mean, on and on and on.
Right.
To kind of mirror what you'll experience in Chicago as well.
Yeah. How do you feel? I read that you recommend medically related experiences.
Yes.
How do you feel that is achieved? What are you hoping students get from those medically related experiences that you hope that they express or that they're understanding versus just checking a box and trying to accrue X number of hours out of that, those things, those experiences?
Absolutely. I mean, we don't have any set number of hours. I think it is those reflections and the quality of the experience and the impact of the experience. And, I would say from the lens that to provide healthcare to an individual can be done in many different ways. And all of them are, as I mentioned earlier, very important, equally important. So why is it a physician? Why is it that's the lens, not a mid-level provider or a pharmacist or a social worker? I mean, it goes on and thinking about how to serve others. And so what is it that's unique role, responsibility that a physician can have? And so how do you figure that out?
Right.
Typically, you're able to at least see parts of that, not everything, but parts of that through these direct patient exposure experiences that you have, where you see how a physician interacts with a patient, because that's the role you want to have. I sometimes give the analogy, if you wanted to be a mechanic, you wouldn't just go and hang out for 1 hour and see one car, right? You would kind of understand all the different roles and responsibilities. And so it's so complex and it's such a long journey. And so I don't think any admissions committee who's trying to be difficult. I
Mm-hmm.
think they really want no one to be surprised of what's
Right.
ahead. And I think some students are still surprised. And they say that to, they're like, I didn't realize it was going to be this hard.
Yeah.
I didn't realize all that's incorporated. And so having these experiences allows you to tap in to a small subset, because you really don't know anything until you're in that experience.
Yeah.
And we know that in general. So it allows you just to start recognizing what is ahead, what responses I have, how will I learn, what will I contribute. And I think you can have that in so many ways. So again, in terms of our admissions committee, they're not prescriptive of you should have shadowing or clinical volunteering or be a research coordinator, any of these things. All of them offer opportunities to be patient-facing and engaged with a physician, who's the provider.
You describe that very well, that we try to emphasize, say we being admissions, this is not just a hoop that we're trying to put in front of you that you have to jump through, that there's a reason why. And it's just like you described, we want you to understand this profession. And
it's
I'll never forget, I remember interviewing a young man years ago, and he said, he was in undergrad, and he said, when I first got shadowing with this residency group, they all had pockets full of granola bars. And then it came lunchtime, and I thought, well, we're going to probably head down to the old cafeteria here. And we didn't. And then I realized why the residents had pockets full of power bars and granola bars, because they didn't stop for lunch.
Right.
And so it's just those kind of, has nothing to do with patient care.
Right.
But it does in a way, because it doesn't stop. But it just was an observation, like this person's clearly zeroed in on things. This wasn't just like, I'm just racking up hours.
Right.
And so you explained it really well, why these are important and what we hope that students get out of this time spent with physicians or in healthcare settings and seeing these things. What would be what are your advice or tips that when it comes to the application process, that you like to impart on prospective applicants or be prepared for?
Yeah, I think putting together an application for medical school is extraordinarily formative, right? You are sitting there thinking about all the experiences you've had, identifying the top ones, those that are then most meaningful, and reflecting on that. And I think it's a wonderful point of reflection. And it also prepares you then for your interview, when we'll be talking about all these things. So I think it is a time just you put a time aside. You really think about, what is it that you want to do in medicine? Where have you made an impact before and you are excited about making an impact in the future? And just start writing and getting that information down. I can't stress enough, have people you trust to help you, guide you. No one knows how to do this by themselves for the first time. Seek help with those pre-health advisors, individuals who kind of forged the path before you. I love that there's these platforms available that are accessible to all, Christian. You've just given so much to the medical student applicant community here. So listen to those best practices and tips. But I think it's a little bit about kind of knowing yourself and what you want to share, because there is a process of kind of matching to that institution that has a mission that we want to be aligned to your vision for yourself as well. So that's that sincerity to be authentically you in the application and the interview is something I would say. And I think many people think, how do I stand out? It's like, you do because you're you. You're authentically you. And will there be some common experiences? Absolutely. Yes. That would be really bizarre if you didn't have common experiences going to medical school. That's okay. But it's what you say about them and how you craft them, and where have you decided to spend your extracurricular time that is now uniquely you? And then how is that going to kind of move into the future? Those are the pieces that we're trying to come together.
You've You're echoing the things I love to hear. I mean, these are common themes that if people have been listening to this for a while, they've heard. And it's great that you reinforce it and you say it a different way, but it continues to be a theme that you will standing out as it comes through your writing. It comes what you share in your experiences that you've had and telling us and how you learned and grew and was challenging for you and how you're still growing in some of these areas. And that's how you stand out. But I love how you said that. Yeah, of course, there's going to be some similar experiences. There's your pre-meds. Like everybody's done some similar things to kind of do this exploration that we were talking about a few moments ago.
Exactly. There will be core curricular content. I mean, no matter what profession you enter, you're going to have some similar areas that are explored. So medicine is just the same. Yeah.
A nuts and bolts question for you that we tend to hear frequently is for students that have multiple MCAT attempts, how do you evaluate that?
So our admissions committee really talked about this, and we have kind of a core committee that reviews all the applications. And so they take the overall, kind of looking at the overall performances across the attempts of MCAT, recognizing that probably the most recent attempts are most representative of the current knowledge and competencies and best aligned kind of thinking, because there's been some typically growth that's happened over time or in some investment of maybe I needed to take a little more coursework or study this content area to, again, be prepared for the rigors that are ahead. So I think it's done holistically, not that we don't drop anything or not. It's so unique because it might be that someone took 2 or 5, or it might be clustered, or it might be really spread out. And then there's the narrative that weaves in, right? You can see, oh, wait, this person went and had this experience, and then they came back and they did this. And now, okay, they maybe took some more coursework, and here we are. And this is the whole person in front of us.
Yep. So the bottom line is there is some context that you try to 100%. Weave into that and to try to figure out where and why this may have, if previous attempts were not what they maybe hoped, there's usually sometimes a reason why.
Yes.
That's wonderful. I guess gap years. I want to wrap up with gap years. That's become kind of a popular thing, I think, in the last few years to see students taking time after they graduate prior to application. Is there anything that you prefer to see or trends that you're seeing that have stood out to you?
Yeah, I absolutely think it's kind of just a national trend to see this increase in gap years. And I hope, and it's interesting because when I was in my role as a program director, we started seeing some of these trends within my field of medicine. And my hope then and now, what I tell applicants is to have it be a growth experience, have it be a formative experience. And if it really is a means to an end, then kind of look at it and understand, well, do we need that? Have we had those experiences? Is this augmenting something? And it can be answered in many ways, meaning it might be, I haven't had enough direct medical exposure, and I need to know before I embark on this journey. I want to go and potentially contribute to science, so I want to explore that and understand kind of the scientific method or the rigors of doing discovery. Or I just went through undergrad and it was pretty intense, and I want to do these things, but I need to breathe. And while I'm breathing, I'm going to do some other things. Of course, that is important, I do think.
Yeah.
In terms of having just that time and space before I enter the rigors of medical school, which has a long journey ahead, right? 4 plus at least 3 plus, maybe 8.
It doesn't stop.
Depends.
Once the train starts, It doesn't stop.
Yes. And there are spaces there and times also to take, time. Like we have a lot of students who are participating in RISE, which is the extension of our student research, our research intensive scholarly emphasis, where you can take a gap or glide year that's funded, mentored, supported. But it is still a long trajectory. And so I think that if the student wants it, and it's a right decision for them, that's wonderful. They're having another experience. I just hope we don't shape as a global medical school community too much that there's an expectation that goes on. And I think we actually need to be really mindful of that, because in terms of access and equity to come into medical school, this starts becoming a problem potentially. And so we need to really take a thoughtful lens in terms of, kind of the contributions of that. But I think some of it started really with our students wanting to have time and space enjoy their undergraduate experience, because it's like one path and one building of a portfolio to the next building of a portfolio. I feel like we could really talk about it for a whole new session. There's so many components. But I really hope it's an opportunity for growth and for self-care, if that's something that's important too at that time.
Yeah. And I've talked to applicants too who said, I needed to work a couple jobs. I wanted to save some money to pay for applications. And so
that's a very good point.
It doesn't have to be, doing research, but like it could be, I want to work a couple jobs and take a little bit of a breather and save up some money because the application process isn't cheap, or I want to start paying out a little bit of debt that I accrued as an undergrad. There's all kinds of reasons why. And so, but to your point, some students don't need one.
Right.
They don't need gap years. Like they think they do until they talk to somebody like us. And then we're like, you're probably maybe ready to,
are you ready?
Give it a shot?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, wonderful. To then talk a little bit about the interview day. I read your virtual and sounds like maybe going to stay that way.
Right now,
forward.
That seems, I think in the space of access, equity, engagement from our teams, our faculty, and let's go with carbon footprint too, right? There's just so many things to consider. And what I think is unique in medical school and UME compared to GME is that we can have virtual interviews and a post-acceptance second look / first look like experience. And that's, I think, the model. We've also tried to be very academic about it. We ask Feinberg feedback is a big thing. I should mention that.
Feinberg feedback.
So we start with the admissions process and we ask our applicants, what model would be great? And they want to get to campus, but I think this idea of having a virtual interview with a post-acceptance campus visit where your lens is very different and you can kind of take in all that and you can choose, to do that. It doesn't affect the decision. Is a wonderful place that we're really lucky to be in on the UME side.
Yep. So I read that you have interviews 3 days a week. Tuesdays, Fridays are in the morning, and Wednesdays are in the afternoon.
Correct.
What are those experiences kind of look like? Give us some insight.
And we've been, evolving based on feedback. So we have Feinberg feedback. We love it, and we listen to it live, so we can make these micro changes and again adjust, adapt. So what those days look like right now is a welcome, which everyone gets to hang out with me, I guess.
Yeah, that's cool.
I hope that's fun.
Guys, this is a big deal when the Dean of Admissions carves out time in their day. Because there are some schools maybe you never meet the dean.
Yeah, so it's so fun. Yeah. And so we do a welcome, we say hello, and then we really try to take a whirlwind tour of the Feinberg experience and curriculum, because we feel that, the interview day is obviously an interview, but it's very much a day of recruitment and it's very much a day of celebrating who we are at Feinberg. We're very proud of who we are. We've thought about our curriculum. We've thought about what our graduate will look like. And we want to share that. So we want to share, how will you learn? What are the outcomes of our students? What are some of the other programs that we have? Like, we can go on and on. Dual degrees, global health, our DEI efforts are so much. So we try to contextualize that. And then we jump into the interviews. But that's we are able to at least have all of our applicants have somewhat of an even knowledge level of what it means to be a Feinberg student. And to me, that allows them to ask questions, right? This is an incredible opportunity to understand, how are you going to learn? What kind of community is going to be created? Where am I going to thrive in this process? So then they move to interviews from there. Each of our students have 3 interviews. Those interviewers are obviously virtual, one-on-one, individual interviews. 2 with faculty and 1 with a student. The student interview is blinded. The faculty interview has basically the narrative components of the application only. So it's like partially blinded, if that makes sense. And we also get feedback there, because I know there's so many different ways to interview. One, we've assessed kind of our committee, admissions committee, that again is kind of comprised of a core group of individuals. So we have a lot of inter-rater reliability in that process and holistic review because of that. And we've seen that actually the interview assessments and the post-interview review that are done again holistically by that same committee really allow us to kind of have some idea of how someone's going to successfully promote through. It is predictive. It's helpful.
Yeah.
So we also get feedback that our students love when our interviewers have read their applications and they know about them. So we do try to, have a process where they're able to review prior to. Everyone runs their interviews slightly different, but we train everyone. So everyone goes through training based on how in-depth you're involved. As if you're just one interviewer, there's a certain amount of training versus our admissions committee where there's a lot more training that goes on. And then we have a short session with M1s and M2s, which is kind of a meet and greet. How amazing to talk to students who are just a year or 2 ahead of you, see our campuses virtually, and talk about student experience, student life, student orgs, those kinds of the core. What is it going to be like for me in a year?
Right.
And then we close it off and go through next steps and a Q&A. So we try to compress the time, but there's some time that's there.
Sure.
But again, want to give kind of somewhat of a standardized experience where, again, we know that our applicants have had this fund of knowledge that has been provided to them, because we want them to come and know who we are, and again, be excited about who we are, and kind of think that match is there.
Yeah, that's great. To be clear, the faculty interviews, they see narrative. So like experiences section, personal statements, maybe secondary responses, but not metrics.
Correct.
Okay, that's great. Yeah. And I think that's what's good for applicants to know, is kind of what the interviewer knows. I did a panel a week or so ago, and somebody asked, if I find out who my interviewer is, how much do I need to know about them?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, remember, they're interviewing you. You don't have to. You don't have to be interviewing them. And
yes. And we try to share that information up front. So we tell our invited interviewees that you won't get your agenda till right before, because we don't need them to be looking anyone up. Right. That's not, that is so stressful. And we actually, I tell them during the info session what the interviews will be like, just what we just shared. So we're not, I always say, we're not trying to surprise you, or we have no hidden kind of anything. We walk through the day. This is exactly what's going to happen. This is exactly how everything looks, because we want you to be engaged. We want you to ask questions. I would say we want you to enjoy the ride. Well, although it's stressful, I understand. But of course, we understand. I always say, well, physicians have a lot of empathy. we know that part. And so we recognize that this is something that's important. And when things are important, you might be a little nervous about it. That's okay. There's a lot of evidence that shows a little bit of nervousness is peak performance. So, it's all right. We can take a little bit. What are your some general tips or advice for students preparing for your interview day? Is there anything special they need to do, or maybe not special, but just something that you wish that some people would just be mindful of in preparing to come to their interview day? Absolutely. I mean, I do think there are things, this is something that's important to you. This is something you're seeking. And so I would say, first and foremost, know your application, know yourself, know what you wrote down. Any of that might be something someone anchors on in an interview like ours, where we're sharing that information, at least with our faculty. Then I would say also is just practice in the format you're going to be interviewing, because
Bingo.
we're used to the in-person. I often parallel to thinking about, our students are wonderful and they have so many different other extracurriculars are part of: sports teams, music, art, theater. How many thousands of hours have you potentially practiced? Would you show up on the court to the performance without practicing? Unheard of.
Right.
And so this is, let's say, potentially one of the biggest, most impactful events you're going to be participating in. Practice. Practice in the setting you're going to be in, practice with like the audio that you're going to be on. Zoom or whatever platform you have allows you to tape yourself. So watch yourself. How do you interact? All of us have our things. I talk a lot with my hands, so I know that about myself. I'm very expressive. I know that about myself. I have to kind of nuance things to appear to be looking at the camera.
Right.
And it's all complicated in Zoom. And we recognize all those things. But what it is gives you that muscle memory, right? That's why we practice in all those other things. So that first day when you're at the actual event, it's not unfamiliar to you.
Yeah, I love that. And I think the interviews, the way we see students today, or the way we're interviewing today, it looks different than what it was 3 years ago. Because 3 years ago it was all kind of weird and new, and our hair was on fire because we were trying to figure out what to do. Something different we've been doing for decades. But I think people have adapted. And you're absolutely right. Practice where you're going to be performing, and you can record yourself. And as cringy as it probably is to sit and watch yourself and hear yourself, you get to see exactly what your interviewer is going to see. It's not a mystery. You could put on your uncomfortable suit or whatever you're going to be wearing and put it on and see exactly what that's going to look like. And that's such a kind of a gift.
Yeah, I think so. It's accessible. It really allows you, again, just to be able to be that authentic you, because you're not worried about, this sound or this and this isn't working. You're not distracted. You've done all that. That's all set. That's ready to go. Excellent tips.
I guess just to kind of get ready to close, the last chapter would be admissions committee. So after interview days are complete, you're going to eventually go to admissions committee to, as you explained a little bit ago, to evaluate and discuss all the candidates. What happens after? What's the admissions committee process look like? Are you guys rolling, or is it every couple? You have 2 dates that you put out acceptances?
Yeah, absolutely. So the latter, it's evolved over time, but what we've settled on most recently is 2 dates. And so the first date, I will say, is just a small number of acceptances are released. Most individuals are actually kind of deferred to the final date, which is at the end of the cycle. Typically falls at the very end of February, the early March, kind of depending on the calendar year and how things are going and how quickly we've been having the committee meetings. Everything comes together. And so we try to not provide additional stress to the applicant, wondering when those are coming out. So again, are very kind of transparent of, this is kind of step 1 and this is step 2, and it's going to be one of those 2 steps you're going to find your final decision.
If they're waitlisted after the second meeting, do you want to hear from them if they're still very, very, very interested in Feinberg, or is it, hey, we have enough, we'll let you know?
Yeah, and I think every school is different. So I would say at Feinberg, we are very open to communication. This is such a long cycle. It's really tough. Students are putting their applications together in March and April, submitting in May, not getting decision to March, making another final decision in May. I mean, it's a year. And so we are very open to hearing from students throughout the entire process. You want to tell us about something that you did that didn't make it onto your application, or maybe you mentioned a new experience you're going to have and now you've had it and you've had these really formative kind of thoughts about it. We welcome that. We do it all through our portal, and we have actually available, very clearly outlined area that you can upload additional documents. They're titled as such, and so you can best align to the type of information you're trying to convey. And that is all there for the admissions committee to see.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I think we have covered all the topics that I had planned to discuss. I've been asking all the questions, and I wanted to start to try something new with the people that I'm meeting to see what questions do you have for me?
I know, this is so fun. You're supposed to always ask a question if you're asked to ask a question. So I have to have a few, right? That is a tip I will tell to every applicant for sure. So let me ask, how did you pick your introductory music? Tell me about that. It's pretty jazzy and fun.
I find some sites. I like music. I like all kinds of music. And I try to find music. There's a few sites where you can get royalty-free music that sometimes you have to attribute it to the artist. Mm-hmm. I try to find music I don't have to pay for. Mm-hmm. And there's sites out there for that. I try to find music that is upbeat, and I have a little bit of a formula. If there's a drop, like within the first 20 seconds or 30 seconds, I give a little bit of a build and then bang, coming with the intro. So I have a little bit of nerdy, like radio kind of guy thing. But if I can find something that's kind of upbeat, whether it's jazz or electric or some rock, that's where I try to change it up, I guess is my thing, because now there is some podcasting nerdiness that's like, you should always have the same music so that listeners always know what to expect.
Yes,
there's a lot of podcasts are like that. NPR podcasts are all the same theme. They have theme music. I don't have theme music. Right. So I try to make this more just kind of, sometimes I do it themes based on who I'm interviewing. I've asked people like, what kind of music do you like? Like, I kind of like the jazz. I'm like, I'll try to find some jazz, or, so it just kind of maybe personalizes it a little bit.
So fun. I love it. I was going to ask you, kind of prime me to it in terms of, were you in radio before? Is that part of your background?
No, never. However, my dad was in radio, and he was a DJ, and he would
so cool.
Work the overnight and played what they used back in the old days called sock hops, which is like outdoor dances. And so my dad was in radio for a number of years when I was really, really little. So maybe there's a little bit of radio DNA in my blood. I don't know. But yeah.
I love it. I think it's so fun.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much for asking me that. This has been really enjoyable, Roopal. Thank you so much. I've been waiting a long time. I know there's a lot of people that have been waiting a long time for this. So I think hopefully we satisfied the people that are listening with all this rich information that you've shared so transparently and honestly. I'm very grateful. Thank you again so much.
Oh, thanks for having me. And for all the applicants out there, you're doing great things. Keep it up. Stay strong, and we look forward to seeing your application in the future.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Roopal. I'll see you around.
Thank you.